Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA.
Hello, thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein, a longtime journalist and a mom of three. And here we dive into the everyday highs and lows and really just the questions around parenting and tap the experts for advice. A big thank you to our sponsor, Maine Health, for helping us to bring in all these great guests. Today is a great one indeed, actually. We are talking about reading and the importance of reading and instilling a love of reading in our kids, whether you have a reluctant reader or a reader who really struggles, or an avid reader searching for their next great book. Melinda Butler is here. She is the chair of the Department of Literacy, Language, and Culture at the University of Southern Maine. She is also an assistant professor of literacy education. And Mindy is sharing her insight on why reading is so essential, regardless of whether your kids are flipping pages or listening, how we can help our kids develop a love for it, and where to look for their next great adventure. Plus, there's a new phrase you're going to hear. I've added it to my vocabulary. Likely it will be in yours too after this. It is a home run book, and it has nothing to do with a baseball saga. Check it out. Mindy, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you about reading and hopefully instilling a love of reading in our kids.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Tell me a little bit about your background. How did you become so passionate about literacy education?
That's a great question. I started teaching in public schools about age 45 and had a love of literature and couldn't wait to start reading those books to the children that I was working with and teaching in third grade and fourth grade. When my daughter was little, we read so many books together, so many picture books together.
And it kind of takes you back probably when you see those books. Harry Potter, you mentioned we were talking before we even got started that was a favorite for your daughter growing up.
That was great. My daughter loved Harry Potter. I do too.
Yeah.
We probably read the first couple of books together and then kind of went out on our own and read the other books and then would come back and talk about them. But I would even say my love of literature goes back to my mom reading to me. She read the A.A. Milne books, the poetry books when we were very young, and now we are 6. And I still have many of those poems memorized, and so do my sisters, and will recite them to this day, remembering them from when our mom read them to us way back when.
Do you know what just came to my mind with hearing you say that is I suddenly was transported back to my bedroom as a kid and my dad reading Shel Silverstein. And The Giving Tree was a great one, but Where the Sidewalk Ends.
Where the Sidewalk Ends.
Loved that book when I was a kid. Oh my goodness, that's so funny. Do you have any good books going right now?
I'm reading one, and I don't remember the author, but it's What If We Get It Right? And it's about climate change. I'm reading it for a book discussion, and it's very, very good.
Yeah, yeah. Why is it so important for us to try as parents to instill a love of reading in our kids?
Oh, that is huge. It's for lifelong learning, for lifelong engagement. I'm working with graduate students right now who are in-service teachers who are becoming literacy specialists. And I actually reached out to them to ask them about the importance of reading at home. And everyone that responded to me talked about the joy. It's so important to have reading engagement and to try to instill that joy of reading when families are reading together or children or adolescents are reading on their own and then discussing things with their parents.
And there are so many different genres, right? So
many.
if you just, there's funny, there's sad, there's happy, there's, thrillers, there's so many different types. So if you haven't found the right one, look again, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a researcher, and I cannot recall the name, but I've heard Stephen Krashen mention this many times. There's such a thing as a home run book. And it's a book that could change a reader or a non-reader into a reader and really transform that adult or young person into a lifelong reader. And that's so important to
And that could be different
continue.
for anybody,
Oh,
right? Like, I mean,
absolutely.
that's such a personal experience. But I love that idea of a home run book that really sparks
Hmm.
your interest. You know, I'll just share a little personal anecdote. I recently had that. It's been a hot minute since I was like regularly reading and had something on my
Right.
nightstand. But there were two. One, The Women, Kristen Hanna,
Hmm. I've heard of
fantastic.
that.
Oh my goodness. And then Fourth Wing. Oh my, Rebecca Yarros, 10 out of 10.
Hmm.
Page Turner. Anyway, I digress. But let's talk about, just getting our kids to a point where they want to pick it up themselves, right?
Absolutely.
And this starts very young.
Sure.
How young?
Well, reading books to children when they're babies is absolutely important. I remember reading Pat the Bunny with
Yeah.
my
Oh, yes.
daughter. Now
Classic.
she's
Yes.
34, and that goes back a while. But that multimodal, that interaction with the
Yeah.
book. But reading to children, and we talked about this before, but reading to children past the time that they're able to read on their own. Still having that um, daily or nightly event or that time in the day when you're reading a chapter book together.
For like a bonding experience.
Big time. And
Yeah.
long after my daughter could read on her own, we were still reading Little House on the Prairie series, or we were reading Anne of Green Gables series, and then kind of went into the Harry Potter series. And even after that, we continued to read books together every night.
And how does reading, that kind of reading,
Mhm.
help just children in general when it comes to literacy and their own reading
Yes,
abilities?
that's a really good question. There are many, many studies that show how important reading engagement and family involvement in reading is at home, and that does many times transfer into academic performance. Standardized testing, students do better on standardized testing when there's more support and they're reading more at home. It's reading volume as well.
Well,
Mhm.
and comprehension too, like it's practice almost.
Yes.
You bring up a good point about how the reality is a standardized testing is a part of the learning experience. And if you're a
Absolutely.
good reader where you can learn how to comprehend, it's a skill.
It
It's
is.
a learned skill. And
Absolutely. And I want to say that choice and time, it's so important at school. It's also so important at home. Allowing children and adolescents to choose their own text, within reason, of course, to choose their own text and their own genre, to let them choose. And then to have time to read. And even like what we'll do at school is have a special place for them to read, a place to go. So having a perfect reading spot at home is also a really cool idea, to have that. Okay, now it's time for me to read. I'm going to go to this special chair or this special pillow or a special place on the floor is a really cool idea.
isn't it though too sometimes a fine line between like helping them cultivate a love of reading and then feeling like, well, it's time to read, oh, did you get 30 minutes in? Oh,
Absolutely.
just knowing kids, like, and it's different for each kid, but you have to find that balance between just presenting all kinds of opportunities
Yes.
versus saying, this is what you need to do at this time. Then it becomes a task and a chore.
That's true. And there are different ways to kind of a little different strategies. One strategy is to chunk that time.
And what does that mean?
To take that 30 minutes, because many teachers do say, please have your child read 30 minutes a night. So it could be 5 minutes while you're waiting in the drive-through line for supper, or it could be 5 minutes before the soccer game starts. It could be 3 minutes before dinner's ready. So it doesn't have to be 30 solid minutes of reading. All those times could be chunked together. And for busy parents and busy families, I think that's it's a really cool strategy to think about, is to be able to say 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes there. Now I've got my 30 minutes of reading in, but I've done it little bits at a time. But text, it could be a graphic novel, it could be poetry, it could be a fictional text, it could be an informational text.
Just having those books there
But
and around and handy for these chunks of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even if carrying a book bag or carrying a purse for an adolescent, always having a book with them.
Yeah.
Always having a book in their purse or pocketbook.
You brought up graphic novels, so I'm just going to sort of go into that a little bit. How do you feel like, do those have the same advantages as reading chapter books for those a little bit older readers?
Absolutely. So that's also very tempting and more engaging sometimes than facing a book that's all text.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a great invitation, starting with graphic novels. And also the illustrations and the speech bubbles, learning all about how those graphic novels or comics are created, learning all the different vocabulary that's involved in even creating something like that. But they also can really spark creative and critical conversations.
How so?
Well, I'll bring up, and this isn't exactly a graphic novel, but Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Oh my gosh, I love Greg
Right?
Heffley is such a mess. And so is his mother.
Absolutely.
They're so funny. Yes.
So I was looking at the one page, we were doing a close reading of the Red Book, the very first page
one.
of the Red Book. And there was a line in there about my mom got me a diary. I said I didn't want a diary. I wanted a journal. And I was working with some fourth graders and just asked them what they were thinking.
Yeah.
And they immediately knew the difference between a diary and a journal. And then we had this incredible conversation about why the author would choose to show that, right? But even thinking about inferring, thinking about comprehension, reading beyond what the words are. So we had a really interesting conversation about that.
Nothing feels better than feeling your best, which is why Maine Health continues to provide Northern New England with the best network of people, programs, and resources working to help you be your healthiest self. And by doing so, we're creating different paths and giving you options in personal wellness. That's health and care in harmony. That's Maine Health. To learn more, go to mainehealth.org/harmony.
It's funny. So with my 6-year-old, we've started the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. And we just this week picked up Dog Man, which my 12-year-old, almost 13-year-old, though he had every single one when he was, I don't know, second, third grade. So we're picking those up and sort of rediscovering those. Dog Man's kind of different too, right? And as a mom, and I'm reading, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this grammar is terrible. But that's okay. That's okay, you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dog Man, Junie B. Jones is another example that some people have criticized the way that Junie B. talks to with her parents because she's not using specific English grammar. However, I think the humor, Dave Pilkey as an author
So
really
funny.
knows how to reach students. And Dave Pilkey was one that was always, and you can find a lot of videos about Dave Pilkey talking about his life, but he was one of those students that was always in the hall because of his behavior. And he sat outside in the hall and started drawing I don't think it was Captain Underpants, it was a different character. But he attributes his success and his love of reading and his humor to his mother, who let him read whatever he wanted to read.
He really gets into the mind of that age. Sometimes as I'm reading, I'm like, how does he even come up with this stuff? But it is so applicable to that 6, 7, 8-year-old, kind of and beyond too.
And beyond because of the parodies of the canon of the novels that he is using in Dog Man.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of humor for adolescents, for students in middle school and high school to look at Wuthering Heights and have studied Wuthering Heights and then come back and read Dog Man. Wuthering Heights, I believe it is. Yes.
So that's graphic novels. I, kind of want to think in terms of audiobooks because sometimes I feel like, and I do a lot of audiobooks and I feel like sometimes I need a qualifier like, oh, I read that book. Well, actually, I listened to it.
Right.
Do you need a qualifier? Is it just as important? Are you getting the same kind of benefits from audiobooks
Yeah, that's a great
as you
question.
do, with reading, whether it's us as parents or for our children?
That's a great question. There is an author that I respect a lot, a teacher colleague in Texas, Donalyn Miller, and she calls that reading with another sense. And I really love that idea. I think that, I use ebooks all the time. I'm reading my mystery series, or what if we get it right, on the way to work every morning and on the way home. However, there just needs to be some balance there. So it wouldn't be all ebooks all the time, especially as students are practicing decoding and practicing rereading text to get deeper meaning. You can't do that with an ebook. So there's a whole lot of differences. So I think there's advantages and disadvantages for both.
Yeah.
But I would say you would need a balance. It's hard to go back into a text when I can hit my little
Rewind.
rewind on
Same.
that. However, and when my daughter and I would travel across country, we would just find a whole lot of books that we read Matilda by Roald Dahl. We read, we found all kinds of books to read and then talk about too.
Yeah. Yeah. So a balance there. What about for, parents who don't feel like they're the greatest readers, or they've never really developed, whether it's never developed a love for it, or maybe they struggle. How can they set their children up for success?
That's a really good question. I think modeling, even if parents are struggling, there could be a whole lot of reasons, but reading picture storybooks to young students wouldn't be that much of a struggle. And also, I talked to one of the graduate students who's a in-service teacher, who has a time that they all sit down and read every night. They have like 15 minutes, and she's sitting in her chair reading her book, and she has 3 children, and they're all sitting in different places, and everybody's reading at the very same time. So she's modeling that. But I know what you're saying. If parents are struggling to read,
or it doesn't come easy to them.
That does become, I guess it would be, again, finding their own home run book at their own particular age. If it's a matter of language, reading books in their native language is huge, right? So if it's someone whose first language is not English, finding bilingual books that you can read is tremendous, because it's so important for those second language learners, those multilingual learners, to also keep their first language. So if there are parents that struggle with reading English, they can not easily, because excuse me, they could go to Portland Public Library has an amazing selection of bilingual books, and books in almost every language you could imagine.
How do you tell if maybe your child is struggling? Are there some telltale signs that, maybe my kid is struggling with reading?
Yeah. And that's so situational. And some of it could be engagement. Some of it could be just, there are many parents with children whose children do not like to read, right? That's a big challenge, right? It's trying to instill that joy, to find their home run book and get them involved. A lot of times, I think teachers are the first, maybe not the first, but I think teachers are that front line. They're doing so much to work with the children, to support them in reading. And then when they have the teacher conferences, to kind of, to communicate that. But I would say if they do, what we're looking at in education would be a year behind, or maybe 2 years behind, something like that. I am not a diagnostician. I would say if there was a concern that I had when I taught 3rd and 4th grade, then when I met with parents, I would share what was happening, but also explain how hard they were working on becoming a reader, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder too if you have any advice on finding book recommendations for various ages. I think a couple of things. One, for those reluctant readers, and finding that home run book.
Exactly.
How do you find that? And then two, and I've talked about it on this podcast, my 12-year-old is like an insatiable reader and feels like he's read everything. So I'll be like, well, what about this? I've read it. What about this? I've read it.
Mhm.
What about it? So
Yeah.
finding age appropriate books for those avid readers too. So sort of finding the right recommendations for the reluctant, but then also for the avid readers.
I think school librarians are prime for that information. School librarians have so many. They've ordered all these wonderful books, and they're sitting there waiting for kids to check them out. Public librarians too. I think that is such a go-to. There's also, and I wanted to talk about this. Back in 1990, there was a researcher named Rudine Sims Bishop, and she coined the term windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And it's so important that students can see themselves in books. All students can see themselves in books, but then also see others in books at the same time. And so there are some really great resources like right here in Portland with I'm Your Neighbor Books, which is a nonprofit. They have amazing windows, mirrors, and sliding glass door texts that parents and children would be very interested in reading. Graphic novels, picture storybooks. And there's another site called We Need Diverse Books, which is another great place to find books by Indigenous authors, books by people of color. So that's also extremely important. And there are many, many sites on like Reading Rockets on the web that has great exampes like books that they might suggest. New York Times children's books.
That's a good idea.
List.
Yeah.
There's a plethora of websites that parents could check out. But I think talking to the school librarians and talking to the public librarians, they have so much knowledge.
Yeah, so many resources in that way. This kind of might be sort of, along the lines of modeling, but just, and maybe this is anecdotally, but I've heard that also just having a lot of books in the house.
Huge.
Is it okay? So there's something to that.
There is research, and I don't have it at the tip, but that shows the correlation between books at home and academic progress in school. A lot of things I did as a teacher was and an instructional literacy coach when I was teaching in Texas, was to make sure that children did have those books at home, because there were some children that came to our school who didn't have any texts at home. So we would do everything we could to get new books that children could keep into the hands of those children. We just recently did that with in Saco Public Schools with some children of New Mainers who moved in a couple of years ago. And we were able to write a grant to get brand new books that we could then get into the hands of those children that they could keep, not necessarily just check out, but keep and read at home.
Yeah.
And again, back to windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. So those children of New Mainers could see themselves in the books that they were reading.
Well, that makes a huge difference too. And it's just about learning perspective taking, right? Regardless of what you're reading, but just understanding where people's experience might come from and trying to figure out, life lessons on the pages of a book. If there was one piece of advice you would have for parents when it comes to instilling a love of reading in their kids, what would that be?
Gosh, I would just say modeling, keeping it joyful. Every graduate student I talked to said, keep it joyful, right? And choice and time and modeling, just, providing that even if a parent or a guardian doesn't feel the most successful as a reader, being vulnerable and still sharing that love of reading.
Well, Mindy, thank you so much. Such great advice. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And of course, we should mention we'll have more resources on our website, which is wgme.com/raisingme. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. Love being here.
All right, some great takeaways with this episode. First, that idea of a home run book. I love that. Yes, yes, yes. And you know what it's like, finding that book that just really sticks with you and makes you think, okay, what's going to be my next one? I can think of several throughout my life that have just really stuck with me and have made me think. So, what's that home run book for our kids? And maybe they've already found it, which is awesome. But if they haven't, just that reminder from Mindy, keep looking. It is definitely out there. Secondly, and do you know what I'm saying about the whole audiobooks thing? Like these days, realistically, that is how I consume the vast majority of books I read. And I often feel like it needs that qualifier around it. Like, oh yeah, I read that. Well, I listened to that, right? But you heard Mindy, no qualifier needed on these. These are like reading with another sense, she explained. And it is an important part of the reading journey for both us and our kids. I have so many notes with this episode, just from starting reading to babies. We've heard that, of course, many times over. But that part about just keeping up with it until well after our kids can read for themselves. I mean, for one thing, it's just really great bonding time. And allowing our kids to take the lead on what they read, letting them find what brings them joy. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield. A big thank you to our sponsor, Maine Health. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts and consider a positive rating and review so others can find the message as well. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.